Greetings! It is I, Countess now Van Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue our discussion on the EARTHDAWN Roleplaying game system. Now, where I last left off, we were diving into spell magic. Let's continue with that, especially continuing with the spellcasting steps that you have to take. We just wove our threads. We talked about that last time. Now it's time to make your spellcasting test. You make your spellcasting test versus the spell's casting difficulty. Now, if you are successful at this, you've cast the spell. Now, the casting difficulty could either be the spell defense of whatever you're targeting with your spell, or it could even be a fixed value. Most creatures' spell defense is based upon their perception value, but some things have greater spell defense, or if something was like non-intelligent or a non-magic item, it would have a spell defense of 2. Magic items often have a much higher spell defense. It is important to note here, if a spell is beneficial, you would still have to worry about spell defense, but the target of the spell defense, of the beneficial spell, can voluntarily take an action to lower it. If they would take that, then for that turn, their spell defense would effectively be 2 against the beneficial spell. They've chosen to lower it for this point in time. It's only for the one round that they're doing this. And you do have to take up your standard action to effectively do this. You're using up your action to be like, I'm ready for this beneficial spell. The spell can say otherwise if it doesn't take a standard action to lower it for this spell. It would say specifically, oh, you could take a different type of action in order to lower your spell defense versus this spell. Just assume normally standard. Now, if the magician is targeting themselves, this works a little differently. This does not take up the standard action that you needed. Unless specifically stated, you could do this as part of the casting of the spell, the end of the casting phase. That means on that last time, if you lower it to get the effects of the spell targeting you very easily, you can just sort of do it. It's automatically. The only thing is, though I've reduced it to 2 for my own defenses, against any other spells that might be affecting me that aren't under my control, my spell defense is lowered by 2 until my next turn. So it's, though I'm making it easy to cast this beneficial spell on myself, I'm also opening myself up to other things targeting me. Now, the spell will be successful if it reaches that target difficulty or above. If it's lower than that, the spell fails. If it's a combat-based spell, trying to do damage, if you get an excellent result, you can break armor with that, effectively overcoming it. Now when we talk about the spell's effect, every spell description will tell you the effect that it has. Some spells, though, have a variable which is going to be affected. This is normally based on your willpower plus a bonus to figure out the step you're rolling for this variable. In this case, if you are rolling this, will force would apply for you. So if you have will force, you can add it in here with your willpower to determine the variable effect of your spell. Now, duration kind of can vary also. Many spells have an instantaneous sort of duration. They're going off in the same combat round as they were cast. That's it, they're done. Some of them will have a measured duration of rounds, minutes, hours, whatever. It will list that too. Now, if it tells you that it's based upon rank, it's talking about your spellcasting rank. That's what you're going to use for a number. Some might have a variable and will list what kind of action dice you're going to be rolling to figure out the variable of the duration. Now let's dive into the 3 types of spellcasting once again. As I said, there are 3 types. Matrix casting, which is just known as spellcasting. Then, of course, raw magic and grimoire. As we've talked about, spellcasting, it's the safest, it's the easiest, it's the one you're normally going to do. The other 2 are more desperation. That's really the raw magic. The grimoire, you're just going to be using that if you're not familiar with the spell and you're just going to try testing it out, maybe even. That might be a opportunity to use it in that format. Now, the spell matrices talent, when you purchase it, represents one type of spell matrices. One spell matrices in the ranks, and it represents how many ranks you're taking in it. So effectively, you can have different spell matrices in this way. You can purchase the talents differently. Each one is purchased individually is based upon your circle, and of course the legend points that you're spending to use it. You look under the talents to get an idea of these. Now, once you have a spell matrices and you have it, you have to attune a spell to it. Effectively, you're placing the spell in it. That's what tuning is. When you tune it, you're normally putting a single spell in there with no threads attached to it. If it's a simple spell, it's the entire thing. More complex, you might have to add those threads in. And normally, most matrices can only have one spell in them at a time. Now let's talk about the 4 types of matrices: spell, empowered, armor, and shared. Spell matrices is the classic one. It's the basic one. It's one spell, one matrices, no threads, nothing special. It's the one that, when we're talking about these, spell matrices are the ones you're going to be assumed to be using most of the time. Empowered matrices are a little better in a way. Now, if you have an empowered matrices, when you put a spell into it, you are also allowed to weave a single thread into it. This doesn't mean you're weaving all the threads that are needed for the spell into it. It just means however many threads are needed for this matrices, you're weaving one of them right away. So it's reducing that by 1. Might only need 1 for it. Might need more. It's just that I'm getting a head start on the number of threads I need in this one. Armor is exactly like the empowered. It's exactly the same, that you can weave 1 thread into it. The only other advantage it has is an armored matrices also has a mystic defense. That means if there's an effect that could target your matrices and cause damage to them, maybe even disrupt them, this one is protected against that. Now, with shared matrices, you cannot add any threads into it. The advantage of a shared matrices is whatever rank it is, tells you the number of circle worth of spells you can put in there. You can put multiple spells in a shared. So if it would be rank 3, you could have 3 circles worth of spells that you can place into it. You can have multiple cells in the same matrice. Now, there is a table in the book that gives you some more information based upon these different types of matrices, but you can always look at the talent to get the full amount of information on each of these. When I went over talents, you can find these ones there, each individually for each of these types of matrices. Look up more information about them. Each one will have a circle requirement too, and kind of amount of legend points that you get an idea of spending to purchase it in the first place. So that's it for this week. I've continued talking about spell magic, with talking about the rest of the actions you need to do, the order of operations in order to cast a spell. These are all the same for all 3 types of spell casting. Any of these, those basic rules, from the weaving the threads, which I talked about last week, to all the other actions I talked about for casting the spell this week, count all the same. Then I dive more into the matrix casting, or spell casting. I kind of went over the idealism of what the matrix would be, what you're getting at through what talents, and what kind of spells you can put in there. To a degree, I did go over some information about it. In the next episode, we're going to talk about attuning, placing those spells in those matrices, and continue onwards into the raw magic, talking about those types of spellcasting tests and the unique rules set for them. But regardless, if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows support the channel, the empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you could always check out my Patreon, link description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.